Malting of wheat is a very important process. The process of malting consists of the following steps. Good quality grains are steeped in cold water for 36 hours. So they have to be soaked in cold water. ஊற வைக்கணும். Soaked in cold water எவ்வளவு நேரத்துக்கு? For 36 hours in a warm climate, that is in a room climate. And when it is soaked for 36 hours, ஒன்றரை நாள் கிட்டத்தட்ட அதை ஊற வைக்கணும். So while you are soaking it, you have to change the water 2 or 3 times. Otherwise, a bad flavor will develop in the water. So while the wheat grains are soaked in water, they have to be changed. The water in which it is soaked has to be changed 2 or 3 times. The steeped grains, that is the soaked grain, uravacha grain, has to be removed from water and it should be spread on wire mesh trays. What are wire mesh trays? Something like a jalladai. So after it is soaked in water, the excess water will be drained and it should be transferred to the wire mesh trays, and they have to be spread very thinly. They have to be spread 2 to 3 inches thickness, and they are kept in a stand. Why should it be kept in a stand? So that if there is any extra water, the extra water will drain out from the trays. The germination is allowed to proceed for 3 days in a warm climate. Now, the wheat grain has absorbed moisture, and after it has absorbed moisture, we are just leaving it at room temperature. And what will happen? The germination will take place. Germination enna adula irundhu mole vara aarambichidum. So this germination should allow to take place for 3 days in a warm climate. During the process of germination, the enzymes that are present in the wheat, they are activated. Particularly, the enzymes amylases and proteases, they are formed. And the germinated grain is allowed to slow dry. So after the germination process is over, you have to take the wheat grain, and the wheat grain has to be dried in the shade. Right? So that is called as the slow drying, during which the amylases will act on starch. The starch is a complex compound. The starch is converted to amylose. Right? So the starch is a polysaccharide and amylose is a compound that is smaller than that of the starch, and it hydrolyzes them. The starch is hydrolyzed by the enzyme called as the amylase, and starch is now converted to amylose. The drying should take place at a low temperature in order to conserve as much of enzyme activity as possible. If you are going to dry the wheat grains that are germinated at a high temperature, if you are going to dry it in sunlight, or if you are going to dry it using a dryer, the enzymes that are present in the malted wheat will become inactivated. Therefore, you have to slow dry. At low temperature, you have to dry the sprouted wheat grains. During drying, the water-soluble carbohydrate, peptones are that which are obtained from the proteins, and the peptides, they will increase. And a characteristic malt flavor is developed. So during the malting process, apart from the chemical changes, what are the chemical changes? The starch has been converted to amylose. The proteins have been converted to peptones and peptides. Apart from that, it gets a nice aroma, nice flavor. This is called as the malt flavor. And the malt, after it is complete, after the malting process is complete, it has to be dried to a moisture content of about 13%. Ideal is 12%, but it can be dried up to 13%. The moisture means the water content should be completely removed. Only then it will be fit for consumption. If there is some amount of moisture, what will happen? Microorganisms will grow and therefore you cannot consume it. So in order to avoid microorganism, for spoilage caused by microorganism, the moisture content has to be reduced to 13%. You can see here the germinated grains. These germinated grains has to be slow dried. After they are slow dried, they can be ground into a powder and they can be consumed in various forms. And this is called as malt, and the process is called as malting. Amylase rich food. Amylase-rich food, or shortly called as ARF, is nothing but the germinated cereal flour, which are extremely rich in the enzyme alpha amylase. So in the earlier slides, we saw the process of malting. I told you the enzyme amylase increases during the process of malting, and because of the enzyme activity, it is called as the amylase rich food, right? And the cereal flours are inexpensive and can be made at home, and it can also be prepared commercially. So this malting process can be easily done at home. So any cereal can be malted. Wheat, ragi and bajra, any cereal can be malted, and this malted food can be converted into a flour. It can be ground into a flour, and you can use this in the form of a porridge. Porridge is nothing but kanji. You can add it to boiling water and convert it into a kanji, which is very nutritious, and it can be given even for small children as well as infants as a weaning food. And sometimes it can also be added to milk, like ragi malt. It can be added to hot milk and consumed, which is very nutritious. It contains plenty of vitamins and minerals, and the carbohydrates that are present are in the simple form. The proteins that are present are in the simple form, and therefore it can be easily digested by children, infants, and also the elderly people, and also for the people who are sick. It can be given, right? So these foods are called as the amylase rich food because the enzyme alpha amylase is more in this